How to Build Momentum in Life. Written and published by Transform Audiobook. Introduction. Sometimes, life doesn't stop. It just stalls. You're not failing. You're not falling apart. But you're also not moving forward. You're surviving. Going through the motions. Living with the quiet ache of knowing there's more in you, but not knowing how to reach it. That feeling? It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's the absence of momentum. And that's what this audiobook is about. Let me ask you something. What would change if you stopped waiting to feel ready and started creating movement, one honest step at a time? What if building momentum wasn't about speed, but about alignment? Not about doing more, but about doing what actually moves you? Because here's the truth. Most people don't stay stuck because they lack motivation. They stay stuck because they've forgotten what motion feels like. In this audiobook, we'll walk through the real, human psychology of momentum. Not the hustle culture version. Not the Instagram quote version. But the quiet, gritty, powerful truth of how humans actually shift. Emotionally, mentally, behaviorally, spiritually. You'll learn how momentum is built through microdecisions and broken through self-abandonment. You'll hear stories, real ones, of people who were stuck, too. People who doubted themselves, who fell off track, who got back up anyway. And you'll see how building momentum isn't about being extraordinary. It's about being consistent with your truth. Over the next chapters, we'll explore how momentum starts in stillness, not action. Why small wins matter more than big goals. How to rewire your nervous system to support change. What to do when you lose your spark, and how to find it again. How to keep going when life throws resistance, grief, or distraction. And most of all, how to become someone who doesn't just start, but stays in motion. Because the life you want, it doesn't arrive all at once. It builds, bit by bit, beneath your feet. With every honest yes. With every firm boundary. With every morning you rise and say, I may not be fast, but I'm still going. Let me offer you a challenge. Don't just listen to this book. Live it. Let the words find a home in your story. Let the questions linger. Let the truths echo. And most of all, let this be your moment. The one where momentum begins again. Not by force. Not by pressure. But by remembering who you are. And moving like you believe it. Chapter 1. When the engine stalls. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're going through life in neutral? Like you're technically alive, but something's missing? You're breathing. You're functioning. You're even doing the things. But deep down, you're not moving. Not in a way that stirs you. Not in a way that carries you forward. You're stalled. And maybe you don't even know why. Let me take you into that moment, because we've all been there. The alarm goes off. You get out of bed. You pour the coffee. You scroll. You answer emails. You go through the day. But everything feels a little gray. Not wrong, but not right. And if someone asked how you're doing, you'd probably say, I'm okay. But inside, there's a voice that says, I'm tired of being okay. I want to feel alive again. Here's the truth. That voice isn't asking for a total life overhaul. It's asking for momentum. And momentum doesn't mean fast. It means forward. Even a little bit. Even a few inches. Because motion gives us hope. It gives us evidence. It tells the nervous system, we're not stuck. We're still moving. But when that motion stops, something inside us starts to forget. Forget how to hope. Forget how to act. Forget how to believe. Let me tell you about Camila. Camila had been a successful non-profit director for years. She was respected. She was capable. She was always on. But after a long season of caregiving, grief, and burnout, she stopped. Not dramatically. Quietly. She still showed up. Still got things done. But something was different. One night, she sat in her car after work and whispered, "Where did I go?" That question wasn't about ambition. It was about identity. Because momentum isn't just about what we do. It's about remembering who we are before we move forward. If this story resonates, if you've ever felt that quiet stall in your spirit, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because chances are, someone else in your life is stalled too, and your step forward might help them find theirs. You may be wondering, why does the stall happen in the first place? In psychology, we call it behavioral inertia. It's what happens when stopping feels safer than starting. Why? Because starting requires hope. And hope is vulnerable. So we stay still. We say things like, I don't know where to begin. I don't have the energy. It won't work anyway. But beneath those words is usually something deeper. Fear, grief, disconnection from the part of us that used to believe in better. And the longer we sit still, the heavier that stillness becomes. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was a former college athlete. Disciplined, competitive, always in motion, until a sports injury benched him for months. No gym, no games, no goals. And for the first time in his life, he slowed down. At first, he told himself it was temporary, but the days turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. And then, without noticing, he stopped moving, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Until one day, standing in line at a coffee shop, he saw a little kid sprinting full speed down the sidewalk, laughing. And something in Marcus stirred. Not jealousy, not regret, just a quiet longing for motion with joy. That was the moment his engine turned over again. Not with a roar, but with a whisper. Let's try, just a little. Here's your first momentum-building truth. Stalling doesn't mean you're broken. It means your soul is asking you to listen more carefully. Not to fix, not to rush, just to notice. Because once you notice the stall, without judgment, you give yourself permission to begin again. Chapter 2, The Weight of Inertia. Let me ask you something. What if the thing holding you back isn't your fear of failing, but your fear of starting again? Because starting again means facing what you abandoned, what you avoided, what you said you'd come back to, when things felt easier. But here's what we rarely admit. Inertia feels safe, even when it's slowly suffocating us. In physics, inertia is simple. A body at rest stays at rest. A body in motion stays in motion. But in life, inertia feels like staring at the same unread email for days, leaving the yoga mat in the corner of the room, thinking about making the call, but never dialing the number, telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow, until you've repeated that line for years. Inertia isn't laziness. It's often emotional protection, because movement demands energy, and energy comes from hope. But what if you're tired of hoping? Let me tell you about Darren. Darren was a songwriter. Before his divorce, he wrote constantly. He said music helped him breathe. But after the breakup, the piano went silent. He told people he was busy, told himself he needed a break. But deep down, he knew. He was scared. Scared the music wouldn't come back. Scared he wouldn't recognize the voice inside him anymore. Scared that if he tried and failed, it would confirm his worst fear. That maybe he didn't have it anymore. So he did nothing. For a year. Then, one day, his daughter asked, "Why don't you play anymore?" He didn't have an answer. But that question, it stayed with him. And that night, he sat at the keys. He didn't play a song. He just touched them. And something inside moved. Not a melody. Not a miracle. Just motion. And that was enough. Let's pause for a moment. If this story stirred something in you, if you've been sitting still not because you don't want to move, but because movement feels dangerous, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because your next breath forward might give someone else permission to take theirs. Let's break this down. Why is inertia so hard to shake? Psychologically, there are 3 core drivers. Cognitive overload. Too many options. Not enough clarity. The brain freezes instead of choosing. Emotional resistance. Old fears. Past disappointments. The subconscious says, it's safer here. Identity fatigue. We don't recognize ourselves. We don't trust ourselves. So we wait to feel like us again, before we act. And here's the paradox. We wait for energy. But energy comes from motion. We wait for clarity. But clarity comes from doing. We wait to feel confident. But confidence is built by keeping promises to ourselves. Inertia convinces us to wait. Momentum invites us to move anyway. Let me tell you about Jasmine. Jasmine was a high-performing executive. People envied her drive. But after her mother passed away unexpectedly, everything stopped. She kept showing up to meetings. But her spirit wasn't there. At night, she stared at the ceiling, asking herself one question. What's the point of it all? Months passed, and one day, her friend handed her a blank journal. On the front was written, "Start small." That night, Jasmine wrote 3 words. "I'm still here." It wasn't much, but it was a start, a spark in the stillness. And from there, she wrote again, and again, until the words became pages. And the pages became perspective. She didn't need a comeback. She just needed to return to herself. You may be wondering, how do I move again when inertia feels heavier than I can lift? Here's how. Start embarrassingly small. Think 2 minutes. 1 push-up. 1 sentence. Celebrate micro-wins. Momentum is built through acknowledged effort. Connect movement to identity. Say, this is who I am, not just this is what I do. Honor the resistance. Ask it what it's protecting you from. Then thank it, and move anyway. Repeat before you scale. Master the rhythm of showing up, not just doing more. Because momentum isn't created by leaps. It's created by loops. Routines. Rhythms. Moments of motion that say, I'm coming back to life, 1 breath at a time. Here's a reflection. Where am I calling myself lazy? When I'm actually grieving, tired, or scared? Be honest. Because when you stop judging the weight, you can finally lift it. Chapter 3. The Science of Small Wins. Let me ask you something. When did small stop being enough? When did a 5-minute walk feel like failure because it wasn't an hour? When did writing 1 paragraph feel meaningless because it wasn't a chapter? When did the idea of starting small start to feel like not starting at all? We've been taught to chase big breakthroughs, big leaps, big gestures. But momentum isn't built in those dramatic moments. It's built in the quiet ones, the consistent ones, the ones that seem too small to matter, until they change everything. Here's the truth. We don't fail because we aim low. We fail because we expect too much, too fast, from a nervous system that's still trying to feel safe. Small wins aren't a compromise. They're a strategy. They're the breadcrumb trail back to belief. Because every time you complete something, no matter how tiny, you prove to your brain, I keep my word. I follow through. I'm becoming who I say I am. And your brain? It remembers that. It builds trust with you, 1 small win at a time. Let me tell you about Elena. Elena was trying to rebuild her life after a career burnout. She had quit her job without a plan. At first, she thought she'd rest. Take time. Figure it out. But 2 weeks turned into 6 months. And her confidence collapsed. She started writing down tasks. Update resume. Apply to 5 jobs. Launch freelance website. She didn't complete a single one. Until one day, she read something that stopped her. If you're overwhelmed by big goals, shrink them until they feel ridiculously doable. So she made a new list. Write name at top of resume. Open job site, no need to apply. Make a folder called freelance stuff. She finished them all. And for the first time in months, she felt capable again. That wasn't laziness. That was strategy. That was a woman learning to move at the speed of healing. Let's pause here. If you're feeling called to rebuild your momentum the gentle way, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this message. You might help someone else stop judging their slow steps and start trusting their real ones. There's a psychological principle called the progress principle. It says that the single greatest motivator in long-term success isn't passion, or purpose, or even discipline. It's a sense of forward movement. Even the slightest forward movement releases dopamine, your brain's reward chemical. That reward makes you want to keep going. So when you finish something, even something tiny, you're not just making progress. You're rewiring your belief that you can. That's why small wins matter. Because they change your chemistry, not just your calendar. Let me tell you about Jonah. Jonah wanted to get healthy. He kept signing up for gyms. Kept quitting. He hated starting over. Hated how far he felt from who he used to be. Then one day, a trainer said to him, "Don't work out today. Just drive to the gym. Park. Sit in your car. Then leave." It sounded ridiculous. But Jonah did it. Then the next day, he went in, walked on a treadmill for 5 minutes, then left. No sweat, no PRS, just a win. One that told his nervous system, this isn't a threat. This is safe. You can come back. That's how the weight came off. Not just the physical kind, the emotional kind, the shame kind, the pressure kind. Because small wins don't just move your body. They unfreeze your belief. You may be wondering, what kind of small wins matter most? Here's how to spot them. They're laughably simple. So small you almost dismiss them. They're fully controllable. Not dependent on anyone else's reaction or timeline. They're repeatable. Things you can do again tomorrow and the next day. They build towards something. Even if slowly. They make you feel different. Not just accomplished, but capable. These are the wins that build self-trust. And self-trust builds momentum. Here's a practice for today. Choose one small win so simple it feels silly. A one glass of water. A one encouraging sentence to yourself. One drawer organized. A one walk to the mailbox. A one deep breath before your next task. Then write it down. Celebrate it. Because momentum isn't a mountain. It's a loop. Action. Acknowledgement. Emotion. Repeat. Chapter 4. Identity before action. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you asked yourself, not what you want to do, but who you're becoming? Not what's on your to-do list, but who you believe you are when you're doing it. Because here's what we often miss. You don't act your way into identity. You believe your way into action. And if the belief underneath your actions is shaky, the momentum won't last. Let's go deeper. Most people try to build momentum by changing their behavior. Wake up earlier. Drink more water. Start the project. Go to the gym. But if, deep down, you still believe, I'm inconsistent. I always fall off. I'm not that type of person. I'm faking it. Then no matter how well you start, you'll sabotage it. Because your nervous system will always fight to stay in alignment with your self-image. It's not the behavior that breaks momentum. It's the belief behind it. Let me tell you about Sophia. Sophia had been trying to write a book for years. She had outlines, workshops, ideas. But every time she tried to start, she froze. She'd say, "Who am I to write this?" That sentence lived in her bones. It didn't matter how much time she blocked out. She wasn't fighting procrastination. She was fighting an identity. One day, in a group session, her coach asked her, "What if instead of trying to be a writer, you let yourself be someone who writes?" That shift changed everything. It didn't demand a perfect manuscript. It gave her a new identity, rooted in practice, not perfection. Now, she writes 3 days a week. No pressure, just presence. Because she stopped trying to prove a title and started living a truth. Before we continue, if this chapter is helping you reconnect with who you really are underneath all the pressure, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. Momentum doesn't start with a calendar. It starts with clarity of identity. There's a psychological framework called identity-based habit formation. It flips the goal-setting model upside down. Instead of saying, "I want to lose 20 pounds," you ask, What would a healthy person do today? Instead of, I want to publish a book, you say, I'm becoming someone who writes consistently. Instead of, I want to stop procrastinating, you say, I'm someone who respects their time. And the actions? They become evidence. Not proof for others, but reinforcement for you. You don't have to wait until the end to believe in yourself. You can start today. Let me tell you about Malik. Malik had never seen himself as disciplined. He joked that he was a last-minute kind of guy. But deep down, he hated the chaos it created. One day, a mentor asked him, what do you gain by holding on to the belief that you're undisciplined? He didn't have an answer, but he sat with the question. And slowly, he started redefining what discipline looked like. It wasn't military rigidity. It was turning off his phone at night, a setting up his clothes the night before, a putting a reminder on his mirror that said, I'm someone who honors my energy. After 2 months of these small, identity-based shifts, he no longer needed motivation. He had momentum, because now, his actions weren't a performance. They were a reflection of who he believed he was. You may be wondering, how do I build identity that supports the momentum I want? Here's how. Name it clearly. I am someone who, finish the sentence with who you want to become. Act in alignment, even in tiny ways. Let behavior be proof, not pressure. Say it out loud. Repetition rewires belief. Speak your identity like a prayer. Notice resistance. If something inside says that's not me, explore that. What wound is it protecting? Surround yourself with mirrors. People who already live the identity you're claiming. Their presence will reinforce yours. Because who you believe you are is the foundation beneath every step you take. Here's your practice for today. Complete this sentence with care. I am becoming someone who. Don't rush it. Make it real. Make it honest. Then, do one thing that makes that sentence true. Even if it's small. Even if it's silent. Even if no one sees. Because you'll know. And that knowing? That's where self-trust starts to grow again. Chapter 5. Motion over motivation. Let me ask you something. How many times have you waited to feel motivated? And it never came? You sat there. You scrolled. You read the quotes. You watched the videos. You hoped something inside would click. And still, nothing. So you said what most of us say. I'm just not feeling it today. And quietly, you didn't move. But here's the truth. Motivation is unreliable. Motion is not. We've been taught to wait for a feeling. To act when we're inspired. To move when we're ready. To push when something inside says, now. But real progress doesn't start with inspiration. It starts with a decision. A decision to move first. Even when you don't feel like it. Especially then. Because action doesn't follow motivation. Motivation follows action. Let me tell you about Denise. Denise was an aspiring artist. She loved color, texture, light. But every morning she'd wake up and say, I'll paint when I feel inspired. Some weeks she waited for that feeling. It didn't come. Then one day, her mentor gave her a challenge. Paint 1 brushstroke a day. Just 1. No matter what. She laughed. It felt too small. But she did it. 1 brushstroke. Then 2. Then 30. And before she knew it, she was painting again. Not because she felt like it, but because she showed up. And her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. You don't wait to create flow. You create it through movement. Let's pause here. If this message is giving you the permission to stop waiting and start moving, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share the channel. You might help someone else replace I don't feel like it with I'm going to take 1 step anyway. Let's explore the science. In behavioral psychology, there's a principle called activation energy. It's the energy required to begin a task, just to start. Once you start, the energy required drops. But getting started? That's where most people stop. So what's the trick? Lower the barrier. Instead of, I need to work out for an hour. Try, I'll put on my shoes and walk for 5 minutes. Instead of, I need to clean the house. Try, I'll do one drawer. Instead of, I need to write a business plan. Try, I'll jot down one idea. Because motion creates momentum, not the other way around. Let me tell you about Jay. Jay was trying to get back into reading. He missed books, missed how they made him feel. But every time he picked one up, he felt distracted, unmotivated, restless. Then one night, he told himself, just read one page. That's it. So he read one, then 3, then 25. Not because the motivation showed up, because he did. That's the moment his reading habit returned. Not as a chore, but as a rhythm. You may be wondering, what if I start moving, but still don't feel it? That's okay. Because motion isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about building trust with yourself. Here's what to remember. Start with the smallest possible action. If it feels like too much, it is. Shrink it. Count effort, not outcome. Showing up counts, regardless of how much you produce. Detach from perfection. Motion is messy, but mess is progress. Track your consistency. Let visible streaks remind you, I'm building something. Forgive the pauses. Life isn't linear. You're allowed to rest. Just don't quit. Because every time you move, even without motivation, you reinforce the belief. I can do hard things. I can move without the mood. I don't need to wait to be ready. Here's a practice. Today, choose one thing you've been avoiding. Then do the tiniest version of it possible. Set a timer for 2 minutes. Start. Stop when the timer ends. That's it. Let the simplicity build trust. Let the motion build confidence. Because once you start, you'll want to keep going. Chapter 6. Make it easy to begin. Let me ask you something. What if the real reason you're not starting isn't because you're lazy or unmotivated, but because the way you've set things up is making it hard to begin? See, we tend to think momentum comes from grit, discipline, willpower. But momentum rarely begins with force. It begins with friction removal. Because the easier something is to begin, the more likely it is to continue. Here's the truth. Your brain doesn't want resistance. It wants relief. It wants reward. So when a task feels too complicated, too overwhelming, too far away from where you are now, your brain says, not now, maybe later. And later becomes tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes never. This is why so many people don't fail because they can't finish. They fail because they don't make it easy enough to start. Let me tell you about Priya. Priya wanted to journal again. She had dozens of half-filled notebooks. She told herself, I need a quiet space, a candle, the perfect pen, 30 minutes. But by the time she had all that, she was too tired to write. One day, her therapist said, what if you just used the Notes app on your phone? 1 sentence. No rules. No ritual. So she tried it. One night, while brushing her teeth, she typed, today felt heavy, but I kept going. That's it. The next night, she wrote again. A week later, she wanted to sit down with a notebook, because she'd made it easy enough to begin. And when beginning feels doable, momentum becomes natural. Let's pause here. If you're starting to realize that your life might change by simplifying, not intensifying, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. Because someone else might be stuck right now. Simply because they're trying to start in a way that's too hard. There's a concept in behavioral design called choice architecture. It means shaping your environment so that the easiest choice is the one you actually want to make. You remove friction. You reduce the number of decisions. You make the right action the path of least resistance. So instead of relying on motivation, you rely on design. Here's how that looks. You want to read more? Put the book on your pillow. You want to eat healthier? Prep snacks before the cravings. You want to stretch in the morning? Lay out your mat the night before. You want to make fewer impulsive purchases? Delete the shopping app. You want to walk more? Put your shoes by the door. It's not about willpower. It's about removing the walls between you and the first step. Because once the first step is easy, the rest often follows. Let me tell you about Elijah. Elijah was trying to rebuild his focus. He wanted to meditate, write, and go offline in the mornings. But every day started the same. He'd grab his phone, check email, scroll, fall into distraction. Then one night, he made a change. He plugged his phone into the kitchen instead of his bedroom, put a notebook next to his bed, set his coffee maker on a timer. The next morning, he woke up, wrote one paragraph, sipped coffee, breathed in the silence. He didn't need to try harder. He needed to make it easier. And that small shift changed everything. Because when the environment supports the behavior, you don't fight yourself to act. You flow. You may be wondering, how can I make it easier to begin when life already feels so full? Start here. Lower the threshold. The goal isn't the full workout, it's putting on your shoes. Stack the habit. Attach it to something you already do. After I make coffee, I stretch for 2 minutes. Use visual cues. Let your space remind you who you want to be. Shrink the prep time. What takes more than 2 minutes to start often gets delayed. Create ready moments. Leave tools visible. Tasks halfway set up. Barriers removed. Because when beginning becomes natural, continuing becomes inevitable. Here's a practice. Think of one thing you want to build momentum with. Then ask yourself, what's making this harder than it needs to be? Now redesign it. Simplify it. Set it up to succeed. Make the action so easy, you can't not do it. Chapter 7. What consistency really looks like. Let me ask you something. What comes to mind when you hear the word consistency? Is it rigid? Strict? Daily routines with no room for error? For many of us, consistency has become synonymous with pressure, with perfection, with being the same every day, without missing a beat. But here's the truth. Real consistency is not about intensity. It's about return. It's about how often you come back, not how rarely you fall off. We've been told to chase streaks, to never miss a day, to build the perfect routine, to never break the chain. But when life gets messy, because it always does, that perfection crumbles. And if you've equated consistency with flawlessness, you start to believe you've failed. But real consistency? It allows room for being human. It lets you pause. It lets you falter. It lets you reset. Let me tell you about Talia. Talia was building a morning practice, journaling, stretching, mindful breathing. For 21 days, she was solid. Then she got sick, missed a few mornings, then a few more. Suddenly, she told herself, I broke it. I lost my rhythm. Maybe I'm not consistent after all. But her therapist said something that stayed with her. Consistency isn't about never stopping. It's about how gently you start again. So Talia picked up the pen, not to restart a streak, but to reclaim her rhythm. And that single act, returning with kindness, became the root of her new consistency. Let's pause for a moment. If this chapter is helping you redefine consistency in a way that feels doable again, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this channel. Because someone out there is beating themselves up. For a break that's just part of the process. Let's look at the psychology. In behavioral science, there's a concept called the self-compassion loop. People who treat themselves with compassion after a mistake are more likely to return to the habit quickly, with more energy and less shame. Why? Because shame shuts down the nervous system. It makes us want to hide. But compassion? It reopens the door. So instead of spiraling after missing a workout, you say, it's okay. I'll move again tomorrow. Instead of abandoning your goals, you say, breaks happen. I'm still on the path. And that belief, that self-kindness, keeps the momentum alive. Not through force, but through forgiveness. Let me tell you about Eli. Eli was trying to meditate every night. He set reminders, created rituals. But inevitably, he missed some days. Every time, he'd feel guilty, tell himself he wasn't serious enough. Then he learned a phrase from his meditation teacher. Every return is the practice. Not the perfect session. Not the silent mind. But the return. So Eli made a new rule. Every time he missed a session, he'd write down why, without judgment. And instead of beating himself up, he'd start again the next night. And over time, the gaps shrank. The guilt faded. And the practice became consistent. Not because it was flawless, but because it was forgiving. You may be wondering, how can I stay consistent when I keep falling off? Here's how. Redefine the goal. Instead of don't miss a day, try come back quickly. Track return rate. Count the times you start again, not the days you miss. Build flexible rituals. Have a 5-minute and a 30-minute version of your habit. Separate your identity from the behavior. Missing a step doesn't mean you're inconsistent. Treat setbacks as part of the design. Anticipate them. Plan for them. Normalize them. Because consistency isn't about being perfect. It's about being faithful. To the process. To the vision. To yourself. Here's a reflection. Where in my life have I mistaken a pause for failure? Take that place. Breathe into it. Forgive the break. Then return. Gently. Let your comeback be quiet. But powerful. Because that's where consistency begins again. Chapter 8. The Myth of Motivation Slumps. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a stretch of days, or weeks, where you just didn't feel like doing anything? Not lazy, not depressed, just numb. Like your get up and go quietly got up and left. And you told yourself, I'm in a slump. And then you waited for motivation to come back. But what if you're not in a slump? What if you're in a signal? A message from your body, from your nervous system, from your life, asking you to stop chasing more and start listening deeper. Here's the truth. There's no such thing as a motivation slump without context. What you call laziness might be burnout. What you call resistance might be overwhelm. What you call distraction might be emotional overload. And what you call a lack of discipline might actually be your body saying, I can't keep up with the pace you're forcing me to maintain. Slumps aren't personal failures. They're biological feedback. And if you don't listen to them, you don't heal them. You just cycle through them. Let me tell you about Cruz. Cruz was a personal trainer. Disciplined. Motivated. Always in motion. But one winter, he hit a wall. He stopped working out. Stopped checking in with clients. Stopped showing up the way he used to. And the guilt hit hard. He kept asking himself, what's wrong with me? Until a friend asked something different. What happened before the slump started? And Cruz realized. His dad had been hospitalized. His relationship had ended. He hadn't taken a real break in 3 years. He wasn't slumping. He was processing. And once he gave himself space to grieve, to rest, to feel, his drive came back. Not with force, but with truth. Because motivation doesn't disappear randomly. It gets buried under everything we refuse to feel. Let's pause for a moment. If this message is helping you shift from guilt to grace, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. Because someone out there is calling themselves lazy, when what they really are is tired. Here's what neuroscience tells us. The brain runs on neurochemical cycles. Dopamine, serotonin, cortisol. If those systems are out of balance, because of stress, overwork, trauma, or poor sleep, your brain will literally resist effort. Not because you're broken. Because your biology is asking for repair. So what looks like a slump might actually be emotional depletion, a need for nervous system regulation, a cognitive fatigue from decision overload, hormonal imbalance or nutritional deficiency, a suppressed grief or emotional avoidance. And you can't motivate your way out of that. You need to care for yourself differently. Let me tell you about Anika. Anika was a college student, juggling school, work, and caregiving for her younger sibling. She prided herself on pushing through. But one semester, she couldn't. She stopped attending classes, stopped responding to messages, felt like she had checked out. She told her advisor, "I don't know what's wrong. I just can't care anymore." And he said something that changed her. When survival becomes your baseline, the brain shuts down anything that isn't urgent. You're not lazy, you're in preservation mode. Anika cried for the first time in months. And slowly, she gave herself permission to rest, to eat better, to talk to someone. Within weeks, her energy shifted. Because her slump wasn't a failure. It was a flag. And once she honored it, she rose again. Not because she pushed harder, but because she healed. You may be wondering, how do I tell the difference between a slump that needs action and a slump that needs rest? Ask yourself, what happened before this began? Have I been asking too much of myself lately? Is this a lack of desire or a lack of capacity? What would I say to a friend feeling this way? What small act of care can I offer myself today? If the answer leads you towards stillness, let that be the step. Because healing is also motion. Here's a practice. Instead of forcing yourself to snap out of it, write down 3 things you're avoiding feeling. Then sit with one. Name it. Let it move through you. No judgment. No fixing. Just presence. Then, when you're ready, do one small thing. A walk. A stretch. A meal. Not to produce, but to reconnect. Because momentum doesn't always look like movement. Sometimes, it looks like coming home to yourself. Chapter 9. Rebuilding after you fall off. Let me ask you something. What do you tell yourself when you fall off? When the habit breaks? When the journal stays closed? When the workouts stop? When the progress fades into silence? Do you call yourself undisciplined? Do you spiral into shame? Do you tell yourself the story you always feared was true? See? I knew I couldn't stick with it. We've all been there. But here's the truth. Falling off is not the end. Staying off is a choice. And momentum can return. Stronger. Wiser. Softer. You just have to learn how to rebuild without punishing yourself for having paused. Let's get honest. You will fall off. Life will interrupt your streak. Grief will disrupt your goals. Seasons will shift. Motivation will fade. But falling isn't the problem. What you believe about the fall is. Because most people don't quit when they fall. They quit when the fall confirms their inner fear. That they're not cut out for this. That they're not that kind of person. That they've ruined the progress and don't deserve to start again. But every fall is a fork in the road. Shame. Or return. And the path you choose shapes your story. Let me tell you about Maria. Maria had been sober for 11 months. She was proud, steady, healing. Then one night, during a wave of grief, she relapsed. 1 drink turned into 3. The next morning, she was gutted. Not by the alcohol, but by the shame. She thought of throwing it all away. But her sponsor said something that anchored her. You didn't lose 11 months. You just had 1 hard night. That sentence gave her breath. She didn't start from zero. She started from experience. And that became her new foundation. Because a stumble doesn't erase the miles you've walked. It just reminds you to tie your shoes again. And keep going. Before we go on, if this chapter is helping you rewrite your relationship with falling off, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because someone right now is one shame spiral away from giving up on something they were born to keep building. Here's the psychology. The reason it's so hard to start again is because we attach morality to consistency. We think being good means being perfect. So the moment we fall off, we judge ourselves as bad. That's why many people don't return to the gym, or their creative work, or their healing process. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't feel worthy to. But you don't have to earn your way back. You just have to return. And if you can do that, you're already rebuilding. Let me tell you about Isaac. Isaac was a dad of 3, trying to build a morning meditation habit. It was going well, until life got chaotic. Kids got sick. Work got stressful. He fell off for weeks. One morning, he caught himself reaching for his phone instead of his breath. He sighed and said, "I'm so bad at this." But then he remembered something his wife told him. "You're not bad. You're beginning again." So he Saturday, just for 3 minutes. Eyes closed. Hands steady. It wasn't perfect. But it was powerful. Because it was proof that rebuilding doesn't require being ready. It just requires being willing. You may be wondering, what does rebuilding actually look like? Practically? Here's how to do it with kindness and clarity. A start where you are, not where you left off. You don't need to make up for missed time. A shrink the restart. 1 rep, 1 sentence. 1 breath. That's enough. Change your self-talk. Say, "I'm returning," not "I'm starting over." Find your lesson. Ask, what did this fall teach me about what I need to thrive? Set up support. Don't rebuild alone. Let others hold space while you find your footing again. Because the most powerful form of momentum isn't speed, it's resilience. Here's a reflection. When I fall off, what do I make it mean about me? Write it. Name it. Then rewrite it. Replace shame with story. Replace pressure with presence. Say to yourself, "I'm not broken. I'm rebuilding." And every time you return, you become someone even more anchored. Chapter 10. The Power of One Aligned Step. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right and still getting nowhere? You had the checklist, the planner, the podcasts, the goals, and yet, no shift, no traction, no fire. It's exhausting, isn't it? But here's the truth. Doing more doesn't guarantee momentum. Doing what matters does. One aligned step is more powerful than 100 anxious ones. We live in a culture obsessed with movement, with multitasking, with proving we're progressing. But momentum isn't about doing a lot. It's about doing what's true. And truth has a rhythm, a resonance, a way of settling into your bones when you're finally walking in the direction that belongs to you. That's alignment. And one step from that place can shift everything. Let me tell you about Nora. Nora had been trying to grow her business for 3 years. She read every book, tried every strategy, worked 10-hour days. But nothing clicked. Until her mentor asked, "What part of this are you doing because it's expected? And what part are you doing because it's yours?" That question landed hard. She realized she was building a version of success that wasn't her own. So she simplified. Let go of what wasn't aligned. Redesigned her offer around what she actually loved doing. And within 3 months, the momentum returned. Not because she pushed harder, but because she realigned her step. Let's pause here. If you're realizing that your energy isn't the problem, your direction is. Take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this chapter. You might help someone else stop sprinting in the wrong direction and start walking in the right one. There's a powerful principle in psychology called value-congruent behavior. It means your actions line up with your core values, not someone else's, not the world's, yours. When your actions are value-aligned, your internal resistance drops. Your energy rises. Your confidence strengthens. Because you're no longer pretending. You're practicing integrity. And when you're in integrity, you don't burn out as quickly. You don't question yourself as much. You don't need to convince others. Your step speaks for itself. Let me tell you about Jonah. Jonah was in law school, top of his class, on track for big firm success. But every step forward felt heavier. He couldn't sleep. He dreaded waking up. One day, during a practicum, he helped a non-profit with policy reform. And something lit up inside him. No awards. No prestige. Just purpose. He dropped the big firm internship. Everyone said he was crazy. But Jonah knew. He had finally taken a step that aligned. And once he did, everything else moved with him. You may be wondering, how do I know what an aligned step actually looks like? Start with this. Does it feel expansive or contractive? Alignment opens your chest, even when it challenges you. Does it match your core values? If not, ask, whose goal is this, really? Is it sustainable for your nervous system? If it burns you out, it may not belong to you. Would I still choose it without recognition? If yes, it's probably real. Do I feel more me when I do it? That's your signal. Alignment doesn't mean ease, but it does mean honesty. And honesty creates momentum that doesn't need to be forced. Here's a practice. Instead of asking, what's next? Ask, what feels most true next? Then take that step, even if it's small, even if no one understands. Because your soul doesn't care how fast you're moving. It cares where you're moving. And when you get that part right, momentum follows. Chapter 11. The Truth About Self-Sabotage. Let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself doing the exact opposite of what you promised yourself? You planned. You prepared. You were ready. Then, right when it mattered, you ghosted your own growth. You didn't show up. You picked the easy thing. You shut the door on the momentum you wanted. And then you whispered, why do I keep doing this to myself? It's one of the most painful questions a person can ask. But here's the truth. Self-sabotage isn't destruction. It's protection. It's not because you don't want to grow. It's because a part of you, quietly, deeply, fears what growth might cost. We often think of self-sabotage as failure. But psychology sees it differently. It's internal conflict. It's two parts of you. One that wants to expand, and one that wants to stay safe. And when those parts don't feel heard, they fight each other. One pulls forward, the other pulls back, and you call it stuck. But what you're really experiencing is a lack of inner agreement. Let me tell you about Rhea. Rhea wanted to go all in on her coaching business. She had the skills, the story, the heart. She even quit her 9-to-5 job. But when it came time to launch, she froze. She delayed her website, missed deadlines, ignored her inbox. And then she told herself the story we've all told. Maybe I'm just not meant for this. But in a therapy session, her coach asked, what does success threaten? Rhea paused. And then, the tears came. She realized, if she succeeded, her family might expect more from her. More money, more time, more responsibility. And that overwhelmed her. So a part of her shut it down, before it could begin. She wasn't sabotaging her dream. She was protecting herself from what her nervous system perceived as danger. Let's pause for a moment. If this is helping you see your patterns with more softness and less shame, take a second to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because someone out there is blaming themselves for something their nervous system is simply trying to survive. Let's go deeper. There are 3 core reasons we self-sabotage. Fear of success. What if more visibility brings more pressure? More judgment? More to lose? Fear of change. Even good change requires letting go of the familiar. And your brain prefers familiar, even if it's painful. Unresolved identity conflict. You're trying to live like a new version of you, while still believing the old version is the real one. And when your identity and behavior don't match, something inside pulls the brakes. Not because you're weak, but because you're wired to protect what feels known. Let me tell you about Deshaun. Deshaun lost 70 pounds. He was healthier, stronger, more confident. But after reaching his goal, he started gaining the weight back. Fast. He felt ashamed, confused, until he unpacked it. Turns out, growing up, he had always been the big, funny guy. It was part of how people loved him. And when he changed, he didn't know who he was anymore. So subconsciously, he went back. Not because he wanted to, but because that identity still felt safer. Once he understood that, he could build a new identity. One that allowed both his health and his humor. And he kept the weight off. Not because he worked harder, but because he stopped fighting himself. You may be wondering, how do I stop self-sabotaging when I see it happening? Here's how. Pause without punishment. Say, something in me feels threatened. I want to understand it. Name the fear beneath the resistance. Ask, what am I afraid success will cost me? Create inner agreements. Reassure the scared part of you, we'll grow together, and I won't abandon you. Rebuild identity. Say, I'm safe as the person I'm becoming. I don't need to be who I was. Seek regulation, not motivation. Breathwork, movement, rest, anything to calm the nervous system when the fear rises. Because when your body feels safe to grow, your actions stop trying to protect you from the very thing you want. Here's a reflection. Where am I sabotaging my momentum? Because I haven't made peace with what success might demand of me. Write the fear. Honor the fear. Then reframe it. Tell yourself, I can grow, without losing myself. Because when all parts of you feel safe to move forward, you stop fighting yourself and start freeing yourself. Chapter 12. Turning setbacks into setup. Let me ask you something. What if the worst thing that happened is actually setting you up for your next breakthrough? What if the door that closed wasn't meant to punish you, but to redirect you? We call them setbacks, failures, delays, disappointments, moments that stop our momentum in its tracks. But what if they're not the end? What if they're the floor beneath your next step? Here's the truth. Setbacks hurt. They are humbling, confusing. They strip away the certainty we cling to. But momentum isn't built by avoiding struggle. It's built by reframing it. By asking, how is this slowing me down? So I can move forward more clearly. Because sometimes what looks like an obstacle is actually a bridge. You just have to walk across it differently. Let me tell you about Theo. Theo had been building a startup for 2 years. Pitching, fundraising, burning the candle at both ends. Then, right before a major deal closed, his investor pulled out. Everything collapsed. He called it the worst week of his life. He went numb, stopped talking to his team, almost quit the whole thing. Until one night, his friend asked him, if this didn't break you, what did it build in you? And Theo paused. He realized. It built clarity. It built patience. It built discernment about who he wanted to work with next. 3 months later, he relaunched with new partners. Wiser, slower, stronger. Because the setback didn't ruin him. It refined him. Let's pause for a moment. If you've been holding on to a moment that feels like failure, and this chapter is helping you breathe through it, please like, subscribe, and share this message. Because someone else is stuck in what looks like an ending, but is actually a beginning in disguise. Here's the psychology. Your brain processes setbacks as threat. It activates the same system used for physical danger, which means you'll naturally want to shut down, withdraw, blame, run. But when you pause the spiral and shift the question from why did this happen to me to how is this happening for me, you reclaim power. And in that power, momentum returns. Not immediately, but undeniably. Because the pain becomes useful. Let me tell you about Jade. Jade was training for a marathon. 10 weeks in, she tore a ligament. She was devastated. All that progress, gone. But as she recovered, she started swimming. Then strength training. Then therapy. And by the time her body healed, her mind was stronger than ever. She didn't run the race she trained for, but she ran something deeper. The race back to herself. And that version of her? More grounded, more resilient, more real. Because the setback wasn't subtraction. It was setup. You may be wondering, how do I know if a setback is here to stop me or strengthen me? Here's the truth. Or if it stripped something false, be grateful. Or if it slowed you down long enough to see clearly, pay attention. Or if it forced you to feel, let that become fuel. Or if it cracked your identity, build one that's more honest. Or if it hurt, heal. Then move again. Because healing is momentum. Just slower. Just deeper. Just quieter than the world claps for. Here's a practice. Think of a setback you're carrying. Write down. This felt like a loss. But it taught me. Don't rush it. Don't minimize it. Let the lesson rise. Because the setup only reveals itself to the ones willing to look beneath the wreckage. Chapter 13. The environment that shapes you. Let me ask you something. Are you struggling to stay consistent? Or are you just trying to grow in an environment that makes growth feel impossible? We talk a lot about mindset, discipline, willpower. But here's the truth. Your environment will always win. Over your plans. Over your goals. Over your good intentions. Because you are not just a product of your habits. You are a product of your surroundings. Momentum is not just internal. It's environmental. It's built, or broken, by what's around you, and who is around you. The sounds, the screens, the energy, the voices you absorb without even realizing it. If your environment doesn't support who you're becoming, it will slowly pull you back toward who you've been. Let me tell you about Micah. Micah was trying to change his morning routine. He wanted to wake up earlier, read, stretch, journal. But every morning, he hit snooze. Every night, he scrolled in bed. He kept blaming himself. I'm just not disciplined enough. But one day, he made a simple change. He moved his phone out of the bedroom, put his journal on his pillow, set his workout clothes on the floor. Within a week, everything shifted. Not because he got better, but because he stopped letting his environment work against him. He finally made it easy to become who he was trying to be. Let's pause here. If this chapter is opening your eyes to the invisible pressure your environment puts on your progress, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. Because someone else is stuck in a space that doesn't support them, and your shift might help them make one too. In behavioral science, there's a principle called context dependency. It means your behaviors are tied to the environment where they happen. That's why you can meditate at the studio but not at home. Eat clean on vacation but fall apart at your desk. Feel confident around certain friends, but small around others. Because where you are shapes who you allow yourself to be. And when your environment is full of noise, clutter, conflict, or temptation, it becomes harder to access the version of you that's ready to rise. Let me tell you about Grace. Grace was healing from a toxic relationship. She moved out, started therapy, journaled every day, but her progress stalled. Why? Because every night, she still followed her ex on social media, still listened to playlists they made, still sat in the apartment they once shared. Her body had left, but her environment hadn't. So she cleared it. She deleted old threads, took down the photos, repainted the walls, changed the furniture, and something inside her finally let go. Because when the outside aligned with the inside, momentum returned. You may be wondering, how do I design an environment that supports my momentum? Here's how. Make success easier than avoidance. Keep the good habits visible, the distractions distant. A design for who you're becoming. Let your space reflect your future, not your past. Curate your digital world. Who you follow is part of your environment too. Audit your social circle. Surround yourself with people who normalize growth, not resist it. Protect your sensory space. Light, sound, order. These affect your energy more than you think. Because the right environment doesn't just support your habits. It shapes your identity. Here's a practice. Look around your physical space. Ask, does this room reflect who I was, who I am, or who I'm becoming? Then choose one corner, one drawer, one screen, and change it to support your next level. Even a small shift sends a big signal to your brain. We're becoming someone new now. Chapter 14. Becoming your own source of momentum. Let me ask you something. Who do you rely on to get going? Who do you wait for to validate the step you're ready to take? Whose energy do you borrow? Before you give yourself permission to move, we all do it. We wait for a push, for a spark, for a sign from the outside that says, now you can begin. But here's the truth. You don't need a push. You need a permission slip from yourself. Because the most sustainable momentum is the kind you don't have to chase. It's the kind you create. For most of your life, you've been conditioned to believe. You need a coach to stay accountable. A goal to feel worthy. A deadline to follow through. A community to prove you belong. But what if, for a season, you became the source? Not because you're isolated. Not because you never ask for help. But because your inner engine finally started turning on its own. Because that engine? It's been there all along. It just got quiet. Under doubt. Under distraction. Under delay. And now, it's time to reignite it. Let me tell you about Roman. Roman used to get his drive from praise. He worked harder when people noticed. When his boss complimented him. When his partner called him inspiring. But the moment the applause stopped, so did he. He thought he had a discipline problem. But what he really had was an external validation dependency. Until one day, during a hike, he heard something inside say, "If no one claps, would you still climb?" That question cracked him open. And from then on, he started tracking progress by how he felt, not how others responded. And for the first time in years, his momentum became consistent. Because now, it was self-powered. Let's pause here. If this chapter is giving you a reason to turn inward, to stop waiting for permission and start giving it to yourself, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because someone out there is standing still. Not for lack of ability, but because they've forgotten how to source their own spark. Here's the science. In psychology, this is called intrinsic motivation. It's the inner drive to do something for the sake of the experience itself. Not for a reward. Not for recognition. When your momentum is extrinsic, you burn out fast. Because it's tethered to approval. But when it's intrinsic, you move differently. You show up because it matters. Because it aligns. Because it feeds you. Even if no one notices. Even if no one celebrates. Even if it's quiet. And that kind of movement, it doesn't just last. It compounds. Let me tell you about Amina. Amina was a single mom going back to school. She studied late. Worked weekends. Barely slept. And no one saw it. No awards. No applause. But every night, before bed, she'd whisper, "We're doing this. And I'm proud of you." She became her own witness. Her own encourager. Her own fuel. And every degree, every promotion, every forward step, it came from that voice. The one no one else heard. But the one that saved her. You may be wondering, how do I become my own source of momentum? Here's how. Decide your reason. Let it be emotional. Personal. Yours. Track what matters to you. Not what others see. Celebrate without performance. Say, "Well done," even when no one claps. Anchor into identity. Remind yourself, this is who I am now. Build rituals that light you up. Not what's trending. What's true. Because once you become the source, you stop running on fumes. You stop waiting for someone else to carry you. You build your own wind. Here's a reflection. What would I still do? Even if no one ever saw it? Let that answer become your fuel. Because that's where the real power lives. Not in the spotlight, but in the decision to keep going anyway. Chapter 15. How to stay in motion when no one is watching. Let me ask you something. Would you still keep going? If no one ever clapped? If no one noticed? If no one followed? If no one said good job or you're amazing or I see you? Would you still get up early? Still show up for your goals? Still pour yourself into the life you say you want? Or are you only moving when there's an audience? Because here's the truth. Most of your transformation will happen in private. And if you don't learn how to honor the unseen, you'll keep stalling whenever validation goes silent. We crave recognition. That's human. But real, lasting momentum doesn't come from applause. It comes from alignment. From the internal compass that says, this matters, even if no one's watching. Because if your momentum is dependent on being seen, it will vanish the moment life gets quiet. But if it's anchored in your why, it will carry you through every silent room. Let me tell you about Celine. Celine was building a daily yoga habit. Not to post. Not to teach. Not to impress. Just to come home to her body. For 90 days straight, she showed up. No selfies. No updates. No accountability partner. Just a mat. A breath. A promise. One day, her friend asked, "How do you stay so consistent without anyone cheering you on?" And she said, "Because I'm not doing it to be watched. I'm doing it to be well." That's the moment you know you've made the shift. When it's no longer about being seen, but about being centered. Let's pause for a moment. If this chapter is reminding you of the power of what you do when no one else knows, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because someone out there is quietly doing the work, and needs to hear that the quiet work still counts. Here's what psychology teaches us. There's a concept called self-determination theory. It says our most powerful motivation comes from three things. Autonomy, the sense that you are choosing your actions. Mastery, the desire to get better at something meaningful. Purpose, the belief that what you're doing matters, regardless of outcome. And none of those require an audience. In fact, they grow stronger without one. Because when you're not performing, you're practicing. When you're not proving, you're becoming. And that kind of growth? It doesn't need permission. It just needs presence. Let me tell you about Ezra. Ezra was a poet. He never published, never posted, never read at open mics. But every night before bed, he wrote 3 lines in a tattered notebook. When asked why, he said, "Because it helps me hear myself. Because it's the most honest part of my day." Years later, at his memorial, his daughter read one of those poems aloud. And every person in the room wept. He never wrote for recognition. But his words moved people. Because they were written in the quiet. Because they were real. You may be wondering, how do I keep going when there's no external reward? Here's how. Anchor in meaning, not metrics. Ask, does this make me feel more me? Track your private wins. Create a log of the things no one sees but you know matter. Practice devotion over discipline. Show up not because you have to, but because it's how you care for yourself. Protect the process. Keep some practices sacred. Let them belong only to you. Ritualize your effort. Light a candle. Say a mantra. Breathe. Make it yours. Because when your effort becomes a form of self-connection, it won't need to be seen. It will simply need to be. Here's a reflection. What would I keep doing? Even if it never earned me applause? That answer? That's your real work. That's your root. And everything you grow from there will be steady, honest, whole. Chapter 16. The gift of slowing down without losing your way. Let me ask you something. When you slow down, do you start to panic? Do you feel like you're falling behind? Like momentum is slipping through your fingers? Like the world will move on without you? You're not alone. We live in a world that worships speed. That equates slowing down with laziness. That praises the hustle and forgets the humanness. But here's the truth. Slowing down doesn't mean you're off track. It means you're honoring the pace your soul actually needs. And momentum? It's not always fast. Sometimes, it's quiet. It's steady. It's slow. Let's reframe something. There's a difference between quitting and pausing. Between losing progress and integrating progress. Between burnout and intentional rest. You're allowed to slow down. In fact, it's necessary. Because without slowing down, you'll miss the signals, the whispers, the truth beneath the noise. The realization that maybe you were moving too fast in the wrong direction. Let me tell you about Neve. Neve was a therapist and mother of 2. She did everything right. Wake early, green smoothies, meditation, journaling, yoga. But she was exhausted. Even her self-care had become a performance. Until one morning, she lay on her yoga mat. And instead of moving, she cried. Not because she was broken, but because she realized, I don't want to move faster. I want to feel more present. So she slowed down. She stopped measuring everything. She did less, with more meaning. And her momentum didn't stop. It deepened. Because now it had roots. Let's pause for a moment. If this chapter is helping you breathe again, helping you see slowing down as a gift, not a flaw, please like, subscribe, and share this message. You might help someone else escape the trap of speed and finally rest into the rhythm that heals them. Here's what neuroscience tells us. The brain needs stillness to process, to rewire, to consolidate learning. This is called the default mode network. It activates when you're resting, walking, staring out the window, doing nothing. But that nothing? It's everything. That's where insight happens. Creativity blooms. Identity reshapes. If you never slow down, you never integrate. And without integration, you're just accumulating experiences without ever absorbing them. Let me tell you about Amir. Amir was building a business, working 12-hour days, growing fast. But one day, his body gave out. He collapsed at work. Stress-induced vertigo. He was forced to stop. At first, he resisted. Tried to work from bed. Tried to strategize through the stillness. But eventually, he surrendered. And during that time, he journaled, reflected, reconnected with why he started. And when he returned, his ideas were sharper, his vision clearer, his joy restored. Slowing down didn't derail his momentum. It realigned it. You may be wondering, how do I slow down without losing my drive? Here's how. A redefine momentum. It's not always visible. Sometimes it's internal. A schedule white space. Not for productivity. For presence. A let rest be part of your routine. Not just recovery from burnout. Honor your energy cycles. Some seasons are for planting. Others are for waiting. Trust the invisible work. The inner shifts. The deepening. The becoming. Because the work you do in stillness is just as important as the steps you take in motion. Here's a practice. Today, don't do more. Do less. On purpose. Step outside. Breathe. Pause between tasks. Resist the urge to fill the space. And say to yourself, I am not falling behind. I am falling into rhythm. Because speed doesn't equal progress. Presence does. Chapter 17. Building a life that doesn't need a break from itself. Let me ask you something. When you imagine rest, do you imagine escape? When you dream of vacations, weekends, retirement, is it just to get away from what your life currently feels like? If so, you're not alone. So many of us are surviving a life we secretly want to leave. We're not just tired from working hard. We're tired from working against ourselves. But here's the truth. The ultimate form of momentum is building a life you don't feel the need to run from. A life you don't have to numb, fix, or escape. A life that supports you as you grow, instead of draining you while you pretend. Let's get honest. Many of us don't need more motivation. We need a life redesign. Not more goals, but less guilt. Not more productivity, but more peace. Because momentum isn't created by intensity. It's created by alignment. And when your days are rooted in what actually nourishes you, you move with natural rhythm, not artificial adrenaline. Let me tell you about Jonah. Jonah had built a wildly successful career in tech. High salary, great team, all the boxes checked. But every Friday, he'd feel relief. Not joy. Relief that the week was over. That he didn't have to fake it for 2 days. And one Sunday night, standing over his kitchen sink, he whispered, I'm building a life I need to recover from every weekend. That was his wake-up call. So he didn't burn it all down. He began adjusting, simplifying, delegating, creating boundaries, letting go of the roles that didn't fit anymore. 2 years later, his income didn't double. But his peace did. And that peace? That was his new momentum. Because now, he didn't have to escape his life. He just had to live it. Let's pause for a moment. If this chapter is helping you see that momentum isn't about squeezing more into your days, but about building a day that doesn't squeeze the life out of you, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because someone else might be silently carrying a life that was never designed with them in mind. Let's go deeper. The life that burns you out isn't always chaotic. Sometimes it's just misaligned. Misaligned relationships. Misaligned routines. Misaligned expectations. Things that look good on the outside, but quietly exhaust you on the inside. And momentum won't fix that. You can't self-discipline your way out of a life that's too heavy for your soul. You have to redesign it. With intention. With honesty. With permission to want something gentler. Let me tell you about Karis. Karis was a nurse. Beloved. Gifted. Deeply compassionate. But she worked 60-hour weeks. Missed family dinners. Rarely slept well. She didn't want to quit helping people. She just didn't want to do it in a way that destroyed her. So she made a shift. Moved into holistic care. Started working part-time. Offered community health workshops. Her income dropped slightly. Her joy skyrocketed. Because she wasn't sacrificing her well-being for her purpose anymore. She aligned them. And that alignment? That's when momentum felt effortless. You may be wondering, how do I begin building a life I don't need a break from? Start here. Audit your energy. What drains you? What restores you? List your non-negotiables. Peace. Connection. Creativity. Sleep. What truly matters? Let go of shoulds. Redesign your life for the you are now, not who you were 5 years ago. Or adjust slowly. One conversation. One shift. One small brave no. Make ease the design, not the reward. Don't earn rest. Build it in. Because momentum that comes from ease is more sustainable than momentum fueled by survival. Here's a reflection. If I lived in a way that didn't require constant escape, what would I change? Write it down. Be honest. Don't shrink your vision just because it feels far away. Because every little change is a vote for the life you actually want. And over time, those votes add up. They become your new normal. Chapter 18. The people who accelerate or delay your growth. Let me ask you something. Are the people around you fueling your fire or draining your spark? Are they breathing belief into you or casting quiet doubt? Are they reminding you of who you can become or keeping you locked inside who you've always been? Because here's the truth. Momentum isn't just about mindset. It's about proximity. Who you stand next to shapes how far you'll go. You can do all the internal work in the world. Journal. Meditate. Plan. Practice. But if you're surrounded by people who fear change, resent growth, or need you to stay small to feel safe, your momentum will suffer. Not because you're weak, but because their energy rewrites your belief system. And belief is the fuel for every step you take. Let me tell you about Matteo. Matteo was trying to shift careers. Corporate consultant to life coach. He studied, practiced, invested in training. But every time he got excited, his inner circle laughed it off. Coaching's not a real job. You'll be back in corporate in 6 months. Why leave something stable? Eventually, he slowed down. Not because he doubted his dream, but because their doubt became louder than his desire. It wasn't until he joined a local coaching group, surrounded himself with people already living the path, that he reignited. And within 6 months, he'd left his job. Because momentum isn't just about doing. It's about belonging in rooms that believe in your becoming. Let's pause here. If this chapter is shining light on the role your relationships play in your growth, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Because someone else might be stuck in circles that used to fit, but no longer match their next chapter. Let's talk psychology. There's a principle called social contagion. It means emotions, habits, even dreams, are contagious. We rise or shrink depending on who we're connected to. And without realizing it, we absorb their fears, their limitations, their energy, their standards. So if you're constantly the most motivated person in your circle, it's time to widen your circle. Not out of arrogance, out of alignment. Because your pace is influenced by their permission. Let me tell you about Lila. Lila wanted to get healthy. She tried everything, routines, diets, apps. But every weekend, her friends invited her to drink, binge, live a little. They weren't trying to sabotage her. They just didn't share her values yet. She started feeling guilty for saying no. So she stopped saying no. And her momentum crumbled. Until she met a coworker who invited her to walk during lunch. Then to a yoga class. Then to a community cooking night. And suddenly, Lila was back. Because the company changed. And so did her consistency. You may be wondering, do I have to cut people off to grow? Not always. But you do have to create boundaries that protect your path. Here's how. Clarify who energizes you. Keep them close. Notice who drains you. Limit access when needed. Find growth-centered spaces. Online, in person, wherever energy is moving. Communicate your shift. Say, I'm growing, and here's what I need right now. Bless and release. You don't need to fight them. Just free yourself. Because sometimes, letting go of a relationship is what makes space for your next level. Here's a reflection. Who in my life reflects the version of me I'm stepping into? And who reflects the version I've already outgrown? Sit with that. Not to judge, but to choose. Because your environment doesn't just influence your momentum. It magnifies it, or muffles it. And you get to decide which. Chapter 19. The real meaning of momentum. Let me ask you something. What if momentum wasn't what you thought it was? What if it's not about speed, or visible progress, or being ahead of anyone else? What if momentum is something quieter, something deeper, something more felt than measured? Because here's the truth. Momentum isn't how fast you go. It's how true you stay. And the real meaning of momentum isn't movement. It's movement with meaning. We've been sold a version of success that looks like constant action. Always hustling. Always striving. Always adding more. But momentum that lasts doesn't come from more. It comes from alignment. From choosing again and again to move in a direction that matters. Even when it's slow. Even when it's hard. Even when no one understands your why. Because the goal isn't speed. The goal is staying in motion. Without abandoning yourself to do it. Let me tell you about Zoria. Zoria used to be obsessed with productivity. Color-coded calendars. Stacked to-do lists. Always chasing the next milestone. But no matter how much she did, she felt hollow. Her life looked full. But her heart felt empty. One morning, she sat down and asked, if I stopped measuring my life by how much I get done, what would I start measuring instead? And her answer surprised her. Peace. Presence. Integrity. Moments of connection. A creative flow. That day, she deleted half her tasks. And in their place, she started building a life that moved at the speed of meaning. Not pressure. Let's pause for a moment. If this chapter is helping you slow down just enough to reconnect with what actually matters, please like, subscribe, and share this message. Because someone else might be sprinting through a life they never stopped to choose. Let's go deeper. Here's what the science says. Lasting behavior change isn't built through hype. It's built through identity, values, and emotionally anchored action. When your movement is rooted in who you truly are, not who you're pretending to be, it becomes easier to continue. Why? Because it's not performative. It's not reactive. It's authentic. And authenticity is one of the most powerful forces for sustained action on the planet. Let me tell you about Darren. Darren walked away from a lucrative career in finance to start teaching art in schools. Everyone thought he was crazy. But Darren was tired of chasing goals that didn't feel like his. He wanted to live a life that aligned with his joy, not just his resume. And guess what? He works fewer hours, spends more time with his kids, wakes up excited. He's not climbing a ladder anymore. He's building a foundation. And his momentum? It's not loud. It's not fast. It's real. Because it's his. You may be wondering, how do I know if my momentum is real? or just a performance? Here's how. Check your emotions. Does this path energize you, or just exhaust you? Watch your self-talk. Do you say, I have to, or I get to? Audit your goals. Are they rooted in your values, or someone else's approval? And notice your rhythm. Does your progress feel sustainable, or fragile? Listen to your body. Tension tells the truth. So does peace. Because real momentum doesn't create chaos. It creates clarity. Here's a reflection. If I stripped away the noise, what would my next true step look like? Not the fastest step. Not the flashiest step. The truest one. Write it. Name it. Then take it. Because when you honor that step, you're not just moving forward. You're coming home. Chapter 20. The life that keeps moving forward. Let me ask you something. What does it mean to live a life that keeps moving forward? Even when everything around you says stop. What does it look like to carry momentum? Not just through the good seasons, but through the slow ones, the quiet ones, the hard ones? What if momentum isn't about reaching a destination, but about becoming someone who doesn't disappear from their own life when things get heavy? Because here's the truth. A life that moves forward isn't one without pauses. It's one where you know how to return. Again, and again, and again. You won't always feel motivated. You won't always feel strong. You won't always feel clear. But if you've walked this far through this book, then you've already learned something powerful. You don't need to be perfect to move. You just need to be present. You just need to keep coming back to the path you've chosen, to the rhythm that restores you, to the next small, honest step. Not because it's impressive, but because it's yours. Let me tell you about Tessa. Tessa had struggled with inconsistency her whole life. Starts and stops. Bursts and breakdowns. She once said, I'm either on fire or burnt out. There's no in between. But one day, something shifted. She stopped chasing fire. She started tending to her flame. She simplified her schedule. Practiced saying no. Traded 5-hour marathons for 15-minute commitments. And slowly, her momentum stopped being a swing and started being a pulse. Steady, sustainable, self-honoring. That's the life that keeps moving forward. The one that isn't dramatic, but deeply dependable. Let's pause here. If this book has reminded you that you don't need to sprint, you don't need to impress, you don't need to wait, please like, subscribe, and share this message. Because the more we normalize slow, sacred, steady growth, the more permission we give others to stay in motion, on their terms. Here's what the research says. Long-term change is rarely explosive. It's adaptive, built through repeated micro-decisions, through emotional resilience, through designing a life you don't want to abandon when things get quiet. And that's what momentum really is. It's not hype. It's not hustle. It's a relationship with yourself that's honest, compassionate, and committed. Let me tell you about Emeka. Emeka was a high school teacher. He didn't have 1 million followers, didn't write books, didn't post highlight reels. But he woke up each morning and wrote in his journal, worked out for 20 minutes, sat in silence for 5. He brought presence into his classroom, kindness into his community, integrity into every small choice. One of his students once said, Mr. Emeka doesn't change the world all at once, but he never stops becoming someone who could. That's it. That's momentum. Quiet, consistent, real. You may be wondering, what now? You've read the book. You've felt the stirrings. You're ready to begin again. So here's what I'll say. Don't try to remember everything. Just remember yourself. The self who wants to rise. The self who is ready to move. The self who trusts small steps over big promises. And let that self lead. Not with pressure, but with presence. Here's your final reflection. What do I want my life to feel like? When no one's watching, and nothing is urgent? Write that answer. Let it guide your pace. Let it shape your days. Because a life that moves forward isn't built in rush hours. It's built in the in-between. Thank you for walking this journey. If these words found a home in you, if this voice became a companion, please like, subscribe, and share this book with someone who needs it. Because momentum shared is momentum multiplied. And your next step? It's waiting. Quietly, patiently, powerfully. And now, you're ready to take it.